Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I'd like to continue on with our journey, our exploration with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2021. And that brings us to a title which finds a new release, a Blu-ray release. And it is a title that has already been released by Criterion in the past in a previous DVD release. That's Spine number 224. But now we see its reemergence, its return of sorts this year, and it is a fantastic release. This is a film from 1953, and the filmmaker is Samuel Fuller. The name of the work is Pickup on South Street. This is the magnetic, extraordinary, dynamic work from 1953 from the filmmaker artist Samuel Fuller, starring, among other people, in its great cast, Richard Widmark and Jean Peters and Thelma Ritter. This is the explosive, classic, iconic work, which is Pickup on South Street. What a film this is. It is so many things at once. It is so multidimensional, multi-layered, and incredibly suspenseful and entertaining, and filled with so much heart and sincerity and emotion, as well as suspense and excitement and tension and threat and violence. And there's so much in the mix here, handled with precise care and artistry and sincerity in the hands of this artist, Samuel Fuller. This is Pickup on South Street. It focuses in, of course, on the pickpocket character, Skip McCoy, one of the great characters in cinema, and this is portrayed by Richard Widmark. And we have here a portrayal of his ways, his activities, his daily life and routine in New York as this pickpocket, as a type of petty criminal doing these acts. And also he is in this environment where he has certain run-ins with the law, with authorities. There's also this maybe group or other characters that he associates himself with, for one reason or another. For example, the character of Mo, played with so much heart and power by Thelma Ritter. And so this is the environment into which is thrust these sudden circumstances of these real far and wide-reaching implication due to the pickpocketing event or situation or scenario involving the character of Candy, played by Jean Peters, and a subway ride one day, and a pickpocketing event, leading to a whole whirlwind of events and situations and scenarios involving communist spies and microfilm and authorities and the hunt, which leads to killings and further threats and fights in subway stations and traffic, and friends' lives being in danger, and the idea of patriotism and politics versus the emotional landscape that is involved with regard to the human drama between human beings. We're talking specifically about the characters played by Richard Widmark and Thelma Ritter and Jean Peters, and what happens to them and the consequences of their choices, and how those consequences are played out in this real-time dynamic that is, as I say, set with so much force and authority and wit and style in the hands of Samuel Fuller. This is the complete and incredibly brutal and also raw and powerful and so dynamic cinematic cocktail in the hands of this genius artist at his pickup on South Street. And so there is so much layered in to this particular film. It is, for example, or can be said to be a type of film noir, or borrowing elements of the film noir style and tradition, in the sense that we have at the center of the proceedings a hero or anti-hero, a character who is arguably on the periphery of this world, or this, say, periphery of the criminal underworld element or underbelly of society, if you will, on the fringes, on the periphery. And so he has, however, a certain type of moral code or compass, which we see exemplified in various acts or choices that he makes, the Skip McCoy character makes throughout the progress of the film, vis-a-vis certain characters such as Candy or such as Mo, etc. And so we have here at the heart of this film a type of hero, anti-hero, with whom we as viewers, I think, can very easily give our sympathies towards. And so I think this is one aspect of that film noir element. Of course, there are other aspects to this as well, a type of femme fatale character that is maybe in the as presented or as portrayed by the character of Candy, the Jean Peters character, in terms of the introduction of what she brings and the implications of her involvement and the people that she is associated with respect to a particular film or microfilm, and that leads to various dangerous events that involve the putting the lives of the various characters or actors here at a lot of risk. And so in that way, there is this danger element. At the same time, however, just like the treatment or handling of the Skip McCoy character, the handling of the Candy character too has this interesting turn in terms of a portrayal of this character with a sense of heart, with a sense of earnest sincerity, and a sense of a type of genuine emotional basis upon which her relationship, as you see it develop in the film with, say, characters like Mo or characters like Skip McCoy, really have a true sense of heart and warmth. And so this portrayal is, I think, a really interesting one, and it really goes into what is among the very brilliant traits of this film, that it's a film that can be, I think, many things at once and still maintain or hold or establish a sense of sincere, nuanced tenderness, and tenderness towards the treatment of the characters, the room and breadth and scope that Samuel Fuller allows his characters to breathe in and to live in, and to live out themselves, and to express to the world and thus to us the feelings and ideas and notions that they have about the various wacky events that are happening around them as the film progresses. And so this is the wonderful balancing act of Samuel Fuller and his films. Pickup on South Street is a great example. This has the level of, say, as they say, the zany, wacky, and wonderfully wacky hijinks events of, say, a film noirish type of pulp fiction that has also at its roots a sense of the brutal, a sense of the violent, a sense of the sudden and horrific. And so this is lying basically around every corner, the idea of the threat or potential threat in the form of these traits or these cinematic or literary manifestations or representations that can be said to be part and parcel of or directly linked with the pulp fiction tradition. Also along these lines, we have the idea or notion of a type of sensationalistic type of journalistic approach or attitude, the type of no-nonsense expressions that we see embodied in various scenes. For instance, the dealings between the authorities and the petty criminal elements, as it were, as depicted in the scenes, say, involving the police and Skip character, or the authorities and the Mo character, for instance. There's a sense of a type of almost journalistic expression or representation of how things actually work in terms of the police investigations of these various acts, and how the federal authorities also become involved, and that's where this whole line of the communist threat and the microfilm, etc., comes into play, with Candy and everything else. And so we have here this, I think, a very direct approach, which is in cinematic stylings, very much in your face, very raw, and very much filled with a lot of adrenaline effect that is meant to, I think, jar, and is meant to shock, and is meant to give us a really a sharply delineated approach to how things are. And so it becomes this bold, dynamic style that is filled with verve, and is filled with a sense of a breathless type of speed and pace. And it's really wonderful that way. And it has a sense of a type of showing the way, or the processes of how things are operating or working in the context of, say, a criminal operation, or a police investigation, or the way that even the pickpocket himself or herself, how they operate in terms of the craft and art that is needed in terms of the work of the hand as it tries to traverse this dangerous terrain of a crowded subway, and the possibility of any onlooker looking down and becoming a potential dangerous witness, while still trying to avoid all this scrutiny, and instead go for the secrecy and attain the objective, while not giving the game up, as it were. So all this, I think, points to this type of sensationalistic, journalistic perspective or approach that we know from Samuel Fuller's biography and background, which is also revealed in a great revealing way in some of the supplements with this Criterion release. We know this is part of his background, and so we have here a type of direct, raw approach that is, I think, very much part of the film noir tradition, very much part of the pulp fiction tradition, very much part of this sensationalistic, journalistic perspective tradition. At the same time, however, and this is where the wonderful balancing act comes in, at the same time we have characters in the hands of Samuel Fuller and company, and the performances, Richard Widmark and Gene Peters and Thelma Ritter, for example, that really ground these incredibly stylized elements into a realm that can be said to be very honest, very personal, and very much very effective in terms of how we, the viewers, respond and react to the various choices and human moments that are part of each of these characters. And that makes this film so powerful and emotional. There are some moments here where we have characters that are dealing with a lot of, for example, very violent and horrific and brutal aspects of the world, and some characters that are essentially coming down and crashing upon them, attacking them, chasing them, to try to get information, to try to get what it is the objective is in terms of the overlying plot involving this particular patent process as embodied in microfilm, etc. And so this becomes the crux of the hunt, if you will. But as I say, at the heart of this is the emotional story as well. And we see, for instance, a lot of these characters that might be said to be, on the one hand, part of the petty criminal periphery. In many senses of that, maybe through some perspectives, they might be seen to be characters that maybe have very little in terms of a moral stance or a type of a moral based viewpoint because of the things that they do in this world. At the same time, however, we as viewers know that this is far from the case. In fact, the opposite is true. These characters have this dignified sense of loyalty, and of trying to maintain a sense of personal dignity, self-dignity, even in the face of overwhelming and perhaps impossible odds. And they face these terrible and horrifying threats in this way, which brings out the character of those that they are portraying, as well as the heart and soul and dignity of those that they are portraying. And for example, I bring up the great performances of Jean Peters as Candy and also Thelma Ritter as Mo. And these two characters go through, in their own ways, some very frightening ordeals, and they each deal with them in the context of the story in their own ways that might be said to be very much exemplifying the dignity and the true beauty of their characters, even in the face of these horrific situations and circumstances from the external forces that we see play themselves out throughout the progress of the plot of the film. And indeed, we throw into the mix here a character like Skip, the Richard Widmark character, and how he responds to these acts, to these situations that are happening to the people around him, and what he does as a consequence of this. And this also is a representation of his character and his almost moral, dignified stance. Even though he is, quote-unquote, a petty criminal, he still has this viewpoint of the world. And this viewpoint, too, is also a very important fundamental aspect of this balancing act that Samuel Fuller does so well. This film does touch upon or reference aspects of, say, the broad political big picture, as it were, involving, here we have the Cold War threat, very much part of the 1950s Cold War paranoia palette, as it were, as embodied by the communists and the Red Menace, as well as the threat or the need to protect government secrets or some kind of confidential information. And this is, of course, embodied or expressed in this particular story of the microfilm, etc., and the means and the extent to which these villains, as it were, of the story are willing to go in order to try to achieve their ends. And so here we have touched upon the sort of macro or political dynamics that are part of the 1950s, and you throw into this the notions of, say, patriotism, and also notions of honor and duty, at least in the context of the Cold War menace, at least as externalized in these external threats or authoritarian figures that Skip McCoy and others meet along the way. So that's one aspect that's touched upon. However, in the great Samuel Fuller fashion, he does present in this direct, no-holds-barred fashion a means by which he shows us the emotional complexity and the sincere, honest, earnest take of the characters as embodied by Skip McCoy, who may or may not be concerned with, quote-unquote, the big picture. They might be concerned with, quote-unquote, the more human side of things, the more human sides of the story. What happens to, say, the characters that they meet and they begin to care for, such as Candy and others. That becomes more of the concern rather than the big picture macro political aspects. And so that becomes part of the balancing act dynamic. The grand picture, the global implications versus the intimate and the immediate and the human aspects that perhaps in the hands of Sam Fuller and in the eyes of characters like Skip McCoy and Mo and Candy and others, that becomes the immediate and perhaps most significant and important thing, thus driving the story to its powerful and exciting and suspenseful conclusion that always has, as I say, at its center, this human focus. And so this becomes, I think, a great example or a great reason for the declaration of the brilliance of the artistry of Samuel Fuller, as exemplified through these films like Pick Up on South Street, which is so many things at once. It is an explosive and highly charged film that oozes with style and substance, and also has a sense of charm and wit and sexual energy, as well as this idea of violence and brutality, and also the dealings in very stark and direct terms, dealings with these stories that arguably are stories on the periphery, stories that are about these quote-unquote nobodies. But no one in a Samuel Fuller film is a nobody. Everyone is a somebody in a Samuel Fuller film, and that's one of the great aspects of this and other works by Fuller. The fact that we have so much heart and integrity in every corner, and through this examination, Samuel Fuller always shows us the earnest and the honest and the sincere, and through that inspection we also see, or we get exposed, the notion of the irony and the hypocrisy, and also the tragedy, and how these characters confront these particular challenges. They might fail, they might succeed, but that becomes part of the crux of the suspense, the entertainment value that is also at the heart of this and other works by Samuel Fuller. This is a remarkable, remarkable achievement. It's so exciting, so daring, and so entertaining. This is the great, great film, Pick Up on South Street. We have, with this new release of a title, Pick Up on South Street, by the Criterion Collection, we have here a release of a title that already has been released by Criterion earlier in a previous DVD release at, again, spine number 224, and it is right here. This is the earlier DVD release, and this was the it was described at the time as being the new high-definition digital transfer, and now we have what is purported to be a new 4K digital transfer release, upon which this, say, Blu-ray, which what I have here, is based upon, and it is a really great presentation. This is a great presentation of a great film, so it's wonderful to see it re-emerge again, in a manner of speaking. But also in connection with this earlier DVD release from Criterion, we also have a number of supplements that are carried over, as well as a number of aspects that might be said to be new for this Blu-ray release, and also a number of aspects that were left behind on this earlier DVD release. And so those might be interesting to discuss. Also, I should point out that the fine people over at Eureka Masters of Cinema have also released this film, Pick Up on South Street, under the Masters of Cinema label, under the Masters of Cinema spine number 111. And so we have this here. So this is also another great option for anyone who is interested in getting this particular film. Incidentally, Masters of Cinema has a number of other Samuel Fuller films, Fuller at Fox, etc. And 20th Century Fox is also very important in terms of the history and production of this film, which is touched upon in many of the supplements, and I'll get to that momentarily. But returning to Masters of Cinema for a moment, my point is that we have this and a number of other Samuel Fuller 20th Century Fox titles under the Masters of Cinema line. So it's a really great time to be a Samuel Fuller fan. We have a number of options, including, of course, the option here for this film under the Criterion Collection label. So let us turn now our attention to this new Blu-ray release and see what we have in terms of the supplements. And there are quite a number of them. They're all great. So the first one is what's described as the 1989 interview with Samuel Fuller, which is conducted by Richard Schickel. And this is approximately 19 minutes. And this is an interview which we did see in the earlier DVD release. It is fantastic. Anytime you have an interview with Samuel Fuller, you are in for a treat. Samuel Fuller does, he has this one-of-a-kind, electrifying command over the English language. He expresses himself with so much energy and spirit and dynamism. Just to hear him speak, it's like listening to this this type of like pulp fiction poet, as it were. It's truly beautiful the way he's able to use language in a way to express himself, both in terms of the interview process and also in terms of his writing, and how that writing is transformed into the cinematic expressions of Samuel Fuller's filmography, such as Pick Up on South Street. And language, too, is a really interesting, important element of this film and the dialogue that's being used, and I'll also get to that momentarily. But here, returning to this interview with Samuel Fuller, he has many elements that he brings up. For instance, he does talk about, he makes reference to his relationship with Daryl Zanuck at Fox, 20th Century Fox, and how this was part of the genesis of this particular film, and how he's talking about the idea of the director and the use of the camera. He's talking about how he thinks of it as writing with the camera, and this is such a great image, and it's so consistent with the notion of his background as a writer, his background in journalism, and also what he sees and the directness of what he sees, and how he places so much importance in trying to portray the fidelity of these particular scenes and these particular words and expressions. So, and this is also expressed in, as I say, the various tones and language details that are used here. And so this is a really wonderful aspect that's brought through, shining through in this interview. Another aspect, too, is how he is so much trying, or it's so clear that he gives so much respect and reverence for the characters that he is portraying in this particular story, Pick Up on South Street. The respect for the characters is something that he is so insistent upon, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Again, it goes to the idea of these characters are on the periphery, petty criminals, and yet they are given so much dignity and room and space, to breathe and to grow, and to have us, the viewers, learn about them and their experiences and who they are as human beings, and how this is very important. And the idea here is that this is a story essentially about a pickpocket, a petty criminal, a petty thief. And he says here, people are people. And so this is the idea of showing the human story of these characters who otherwise might be just regarded as, petty criminals on the periphery. They have their own stories as well. And so this is one of the great examples, I think, of Samuel Fuller's comments here in this interview. So really wonderful interview. I'm so glad they carried it over from the earlier DVD, and we can watch it here. And again, anytime you have the opportunity to hear Samuel Fuller speak, it is a treat indeed. So please check this out if you can. Approximately 19 minutes. And that's not all, because then we have a new supplement. It didn't appear in the earlier DVD. It is new. It is from 2021. It is called Fierce Independence, Imogen Sarah Smith on Pick Up on South Street. Approximately 35 minutes. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. This is amazing. This is great. I am such a big admirer of Imogen Sarah Smith and her work. She has this amazing way of expressing these ideas and the historical facts and the production details and the names and the circumstances and the historical anecdotes and the thematic concern and the contextualizations and all these points that are very relevant to a discussion of Pick Up on South Street. Imogen Sarah Smith does this in a very coherent, very clear way, and she is such a great guide and teacher into the world of Samuel Fuller and also the world of Pick Up on South Street, and also the various details preceding and following this particular point in the filmography of Fuller. So this is a must-watch supplement from any vantage point. She speaks, for example, about the what might be said to be one of the inspirations or sources for this particular work, the work by Dwight Taylor, and what that work was, and how Zanuck and Fuller were trying to work together in order to forge a similar yet also independent type of story, and that led to Fuller's interest, or awakening or reawakening, shall we say, of his interest that might have stemmed from his early journalistic background and dealing with, say, sources, and his workings with the New York police and Dan Campion, and how this was able to allow him to introduce various lingo into the dialogue and script, canon, mall buzzer, etc., as Imogen Sarah Smith remarks, and the idea of the tabloid, sensationalistic journalism element that is also part of the style. It's the visual style, or the visual grammar, the cinematic grammar, if you will, of this. And this is also expressed in the art direction. Lyle Wheeler is mentioned, of course, and the way that the city is expressed, and how this is very much a set expression of New York. It's the location shooting of New York is actually very, very small in quantity, and so it's a remarkable expression of how New York is expressed right in this film, when we have, relatively speaking, very little in terms of location shooting itself. And so we have this attitude that is expressed and how this is expressed in the art direction. It's really brilliant. Also, Imogen Sarah Smith remarks, I think, so brilliantly about the visual thematic concern on South Street, excuse me, or at least one of those visual concerns, the idea of the close claustrophobic spaces that are expressed, the dumbwaiter shaft, as she gives it as an example, or the way that certain things fall into the foreground, even as there are these close-ups of characters within the frame, etc. So there's always a sense of claustrophobic clutter, if you will, but it is also meant in terms of a purposeful design. There is a sense of irony also introduced or enveloped in that type of visual style that is also part of the Samuel Fuller tabloid, pulp fiction, earnest, honest style. And so it is the idea of the raw intensity, which is mixed into a sense of irony. It's also mixed into with a sense of earnestness. And I think it's all expressed in this visual flair that Imogen Sarah Smith speaks about or talks to. She also mentions, among other things, the great relationship between, for example, Richard Widmark and Samuel Fuller, and how there are these very interesting, perhaps differing versions as to an early encounter that the two men had when they were first working together, and how their accounts about what a certain conflict that occurred between them, their accounts about that conflicting moment differs based on what Samuel Fuller says versus what Richard Widmark said. And so that's an interesting detail that Imogen Sarah Smith brings out. But then she also refers to the fact, or she reminds us, that after the air was cleared, as it were, between the two men, they had a really fruitful and productive professional relationship that also led to another film in the filmography, which is Hell and High Water. And so, but it's a really interesting compare and contrast moment that Imogen Sarah Smith, I think, remarks about very well. She also talks about the character of Skip, and I love the phrase that she uses. She says he is an irresistibly raffish anti-hero. Wow, what a great expression. Brilliant. And this brings us to her discussion of the other characters, the very key characters. For instance, Thelma Ritter and her portrayal as Mo. And this is one of those great iconic performances in any Samuel Fuller film, or any film from the 1950s, period. Thelma Ritter's Mo is a character for the ages, and the way that she's able to show these various aspects of this almost seedy life and atmosphere in terms of the context of her daily routine, as it were, but also the meaning behind those acts and what it is she is trying to do or attain, the sort of dreams that she has as a character, and how that leads one further to sympathize or empathize, perhaps, depending on the perspective, with her as a character. And so to follow her and to follow those character grace notes that are so much a part of this brilliant performance by Thelma Ritter as Mo, and also Imogen Sarah Smith also makes the detail, or reminds us of the detail about the very important use of a song called Mamselle. And this is a very important moment, and how Imogen Sarah Smith tells us that this is makes reference to Edmund Goulding and Razor's Edge. So, but it's used here in this film with so much force and effect, and the type of echo that it leaves and lingers is again another hallmark of that Samuel Fuller style. It's the idea of the shock value, which has an echo which lingers, which makes one stop and pause and think and ponder about all the consequences that have occurred as we have watched them and beyond. And this is also exemplified in this great iconic performance by Thelma Ritter as Mo. And also Imogen Sarah Smith goes on talking about another very important character, that is Candy, who is played by Jean Peters, and how she gives us some background about Jean Peters and her approach to the profession of acting, and certain biographical details, for instance, her relationship with Howard Hughes, for instance, but also the type of independent spirit that she had, and also how this is actually shone through in a really effective way in the performance, because the character of Candy is a very important one. Maybe the people around her might not necessarily take her that seriously from a certain perspective, or maybe she represents to others certain aspects of, say, the femme fatale character, or the character with a certain type of, say, sex appeal to the other characters within that particular space, etc. But the point that I think Imogen Sarah Smith makes so convincingly here with regard to Candy, for example, is the idea that her character is a very honest and sincere character. It's a character that shows so much loyalty. There's also a type of powerful quality of observation and watching, and a type of loyal, sort of tenacious spirit that can be that takes her to some really intense limits and intense edge spaces, as it were, and yet she is doing it for a certain sense of a type of loyalty or glory from that perspective. And so in that way there's a real lovely dignity as expressed in this particular performance. And so this also becomes a really key component when we're thinking about the balancing of the various modes of cinematic style, both in terms of the extreme elements, the violent elements, the brutal elements, the pulp fiction, film noir, tabloid journalistic elements on the one hand, but also the earnest, emotional, honest, human beats that are also very much key to the success of this film. And Candy as a character is really a part of that. That is one of the strengths that gives that particular aspect of the film a lot of power and a lot of force. So this and other reasons are I think, why this conversation with Imogen Sarah Smith is brilliant. So please check it out. This is the conversation with Imogen Sarah Smith on Pickup on South Street. And then that's not all, because we also have an episode which is Cinema, and this is from a French television show, December 1st, 1982, and this is from André Labarthe and Dominique Rabourdin, and this is on Samuel Fuller. It's approximately 11 minutes. We did see this in the earlier DVD release, and so, but it's nice to see it again, of course, because again we have Samuel Fuller speaking to us, speaking to the camera. So, as I mentioned before, whenever there is the opportunity to listen to Samuel Fuller speak, please take advantage of that opportunity, because it's so much fun. It's so witty, so funny, so full of life and energy. To hear him speak, for instance, about Daryl Zanuck and the words that he uses, it's amazing, so great. And here he is talking about Again, mentioning Dan Campion, mentioning the idea of focusing in on the life of a pickpocket. And he's a pickpocket, but he's not a killer. He is a human being. And he's talking about, Sam Fuller says, I want a drink. Where's the drinks here in this interview? And other moments of personality that shine through. It's great. And he's also speaking to us, almost dissecting as a type of select scene commentary, in a manner of speaking, one of the earlier scenes in the film involving this famous subway scene. And so we're getting, in essence, a type of commentary, or from a certain point of view anyway, from Fuller, and because the episode is also him watching this particular scene and commenting to us about certain aspects of this scene. Brilliant stuff. So another thing to check out. But that's not all, because then we have another supplement which is on the Blu-ray. It wasn't on any previous release as far as I recall, so it's something that is new. But this is a radio drama performance, Hollywood Radio Theater, and this is described as being Armed Forces Radio Service version of Lux Radio Theater, and this is from June 21st, 1954. This is a radio performance of Pickup on South Street, and it features Terry Moore as Candy, Stephen McNally, and Thelma Ritter. This is approximately 52 minutes. The radio performances, I think, are really grand and so entertaining and so worthwhile. So I think this is another, it's so much fun to hear another perspective of the story, and it's a really exciting story, and it's exciting in cinematic form as well, of course, but it's also very exciting in the performance, this radio performance. So please check it out if you can. It's one of these examples where you have this still shot that is on the monitor, and you hear the audio of the radio performance. So the still shot is of a radio microphone, but that's okay, right? I don't mention it as a point of criticism, but just mentioning it, but that's what it is. And so you have that on the screen, but you can also hear the radio performance as it's going on. Again, approximately 52 minutes, and it goes by so quickly. It's so much fun, so entertaining. So that's the radio interview, or not radio interview, excuse me, the radio performance. That's not all, because then we get a section which is called trailers. Not trailer, but trailers with an S, plural. And this is because we have a whole bunch, a whole stack of trailers, not just of Pickup on South Street, although it's included. It's a great trailer, but we have a whole bunch of trailers from Samuel Fuller films. This is so much fun. We had a similar type of section in the earlier DVD release. We had a number of trailers, but here we have a similar situation, but we have more trailers. So what are the films that we get here? So for instance, we get, on the earlier DVD release, we had Fixed Bayonets, Pickup on South Street, House of Bamboo, China Gate, 40 Guns, Hell and High Water, two of them, Shock Quarter, and Naked Kiss. So we had those films. Here for the Blu-ray, we have all those films. So we have Fixed Bayonets, but we also get Park Row, and we have Pickup on South Street, and we have the two trailers for Hell and High Water. Then we have House of Bamboo, China Gate. Then we also have Run of the Arrow, and then 40 Guns, and Verboten, and Crimson Kimono, two of them, and Underworld USA, Merrill's Marauders, Shock Quarter, The Naked Kiss, and also The Big Red One, and White Dog. So you're getting a number of the trailers that we had in the earlier DVD release from Criterion, but you're also getting much more, a number of others that weren't included previously. This is so much fun. If you want a type of celebration of Samuel Fuller's filmography, or many of the milestones in that filmography. Not all the films represented, but many of them are in this selection of trailers. This is so much fun. This is exciting. If you watch them, you're going to want to watch all of these Samuel Fuller films. It's amazing. It's great to have this collection here, and they go in a chronological order in terms of initial film release. So you're getting, in many ways, a type of progress, or a type of overview of Samuel Fuller's career in these trailer forms. So wonderful stuff. Please check it out if you can. Great stuff. So, and included in that, of course, is the trailer of Pickup on South Street. Brilliant. So, This is the Blu-ray release of Pickup on South Street, the new Blu-ray release, and it is a really exciting, fun, and glorious one indeed. I should also point out that when we're talking about the earlier Criterion release, there were some other supplements on this earlier Criterion DVD that were not carried over onto the new Blu-ray. So, for example, we did see the Samuel Fuller interview, which was also carried over. We also saw the Cinema French television episode excerpt, or television episode, excuse me, that was also carried over. But what was left remaining on the DVD was, for example, a text which is called Headlines in Hollywood by Jeb Brody, which is also talking about the career and background detail of Samuel Fuller, his life and career. And also there is a writing, which is in, both writings are in this type of slideshow presentation form. The second of these two writings is Recollections by Richard Widmark, and this is Richard Widmark as interviewed by Lee Server for his book Samuel Fuller, Film is a Battleground from 1994. And this is a great writing excerpt, which is, again, talking about this, a number of aspects, included in which I should add is that episode that Imogen Sarah Smith had referred to in her interview conversation about a run-in or a little conflict that occurred between Samuel Fuller and Richard Widmark. And here we have the text from Richard Widmark's point of view about what exactly happened. And so it's interesting to see these particular moments and what the sources or what the differences in the story were. And so that is really great. Also, I should point out that this, like the newer Blu-ray, has that trailer section, but it doesn't have all the films that we see on the Blu-ray release trailer section. Also, the DVD has a stills and poster section, an artwork section. There's a great section in particular, Russell Christian artwork is an example. This is a great point here. Also, poster art. And oftentimes the poster art from this period of cinema is really beautiful and glorious, and Samuel Fuller's films are a part of that. These posters are breathtaking. So it's nice that it was here on the DVD release. It would have been nice if that had been carried over into the new Blu-ray release. But also there's a sense of how new Blu-ray releases don't usually carry over these slideshow presentation supplements from earlier DVD releases of the film. So I can understand why those choices might have been made. But still, just in case if you are interested, the earlier DVD does hold these gems of supplements. So FYI for your information. And also I should point out that the booklet too. The booklet is also very fantastic. Here we have the booklet, which I have taken out from the insert here, or from the case here. It is a stapled booklet, and I love these. I love these, and the look has this this great retro cutout look, which is so fitting. I think so befitting in terms of the type of newspaper, journalist, tabloid quality. There's also the cutout sensationalistic nature of it that gives it a sense of the pulp fiction quality. There's also the maybe the subliminal link to the microfilm, etc. So I do like this look. It also has the writings or the essays, which also we saw in the earlier DVD booklet, which is the DVD is right here, and also here's the booklet for that DVD. And in that DVD booklet, we had great writings. We had a writing by Martin Scorsese on Samuel Fuller, and then we had a writing by Luc Sante, which is Extra Pickpocket Foils Doom Plot, and then we had a writing Don't Wave the Flag at Me by Samuel Fuller. And here in the new Blu-ray release, the booklet, we have those same writings. The order is different in which they appear, but they are the writings by Luc Sante, and then Martin Scorsese, and then Samuel Fuller. So these are really wonderful essays. The Luc Sante essay is from 2004, and then Martin Scorsese's writing is the foreword from the book Third Face, My Tale of Writing, Fighting, and Filmmaking by Samuel Fuller. And then the writing, Don't Wave the Flag at Me by Samuel Fuller, is described as being from as a chapter from the 2002 book A Third Face, My Tale of Writing, Fighting, and Filmmaking by Samuel Fuller. And so this is these are great writings. Each of them, in its own way, talks about these various details of the filmmaking production, Samuel Fuller's filmography, his history, his concerns as a filmmaker and artist, his background, his war background, his journalism background, his background as a writer, and also a filmmaker and artist, and all of these things. And Samuel Fuller also talks about that, for instance, that anecdote between him and Richard Widmark, that little run-in, but of course that led to a really prosperous and wonderful working relationship between the two. But there's his side of the story, as it were. Again, Imogen Sarah Smith gives us both sides in her really wonderfully well-expressed way. But here we have those writing details. And so in these various writings, we have yet a more appreciation, more celebration, and more detail, or reemergence of similar details that we heard in other supplements, other sources, etc., all about the life and times of Samuel Fuller, and about the production details and themes and explorations with regard to this great work, which is Pickup on South Street. So we have here a marvelous presentation of a marvelous film. And so I must again emphasize or re-emphasize the stellar excitement and energy and thrill every time. I feel it every time I watch this film. And there is a sense of shock and awe as well. Some of the scenes are just jaw-dropping in terms of their suddenness and force and brutality and shock, and the way that the echoes really thud long after the film is over. And there is this real presence. That presence also is one of heart and emotion and human interest in the purest sense of that phrase. And in the hands of Samuel Fuller, we are getting these human stories. And this is what drives this film. This is what makes this film so memorable and so powerful and so everlasting. Long after the film was initially released, still it has a power and it has a beauty and glory that is everlasting in the context of cinema. This is Samuel Fuller's great work, Pickup on South Street. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. I very, very much appreciate it, my dear friends. Stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.